The ambulance bay doors slammed shut with a metallic crash that echoed across the nearly empty employee parking lot, but no one inside the emergency department noticed the 4 men waiting in the darkness beyond the last security light. They had watched the nurse finish saving strangers for 12 relentless hours, and now, with dawn still hidden behind heavy clouds, they believed exhaustion had made her easy prey. Maya Bennett adjusted the faded canvas strap of her work bag across one shoulder, her navy scrubs wrinkled from another impossible shift, the faint scent of antiseptic still clinging to her sleeves while dried raindrops shimmered on the asphalt beneath her worn shoes. The fluorescent lights above the hospital entrance buzzed with an uneven hum, illuminating rows of nearly empty parking spaces where puddles reflected fragments of white walls and red emergency signs. Every muscle in her body begged for rest. Her feet ached. Her hands carried the lingering memory of chest compressions, for lines, and the trembling grip of frightened patients who had whispered thank you with their last reserves of strength. Yet fatigue had never dulled the quiet habit she had carried for years. Before taking her first step toward her car, she looked into every reflection around her instead of turning her head directly. The polished windows. The rainwater. The chrome bumper of a parked pickup truck. Habits formed long ago had survived every attempt to forget them. 3 exits. 2 blind corners. 1 broken security camera mounted above the garage entrance, its tiny indicator light dark for at least 3 nights. She noticed all of it without appearing to notice anything. Around her wrist rested a scratched silver bracelet engraved with nothing decorative, only a small geometric pattern that looked meaningless to anyone else. Her thumb brushed across it once, not from sentiment but from instinct. The motion lasted less than a second. Then she continued walking. Halfway across the lot, the silence changed. It was subtle enough that another exhausted employee might never have recognized it. The distant highway seemed quieter. The wind stopped carrying loose leaves. Footsteps no longer echoed naturally against the concrete walls. Someone was controlling the space. Maya slowed without looking afraid. 4 men emerged from different directions until they occupied every practical route toward her car. One leaned casually against a concrete pillar, another stood beside a black SUV with tinted windows, while the remaining 2 approached with the relaxed confidence of people who believed numbers alone guaranteed victory. None wore masks. That confidence said more than their faces ever could. They did not expect witnesses. They did not expect consequences. Most of all, they did not expect resistance. Their leader smiled as though greeting an old friend instead of cornering a woman after a night spent saving lives. His expensive leather jacket contrasted sharply with the rough tattoos winding across his neck, and a gold watch caught the hospital lights every time he lifted his hand. "Long night?" he asked softly, almost politely. Maya stopped several yards away. She kept her breathing slow. "Long enough." The man chuckled, amused by her calmness. "You nurses spend all night helping people. That's admirable." His companions laughed quietly. One kicked an empty soda can across the pavement, the metallic rattle bouncing between parked vehicles. "Tonight," the leader continued, "we're hoping you'll help us too." Maya's expression barely changed. "The emergency entrance is still open." More laughter. This time louder. Crueler. "Not that kind of help." The tallest man stepped closer until he invaded the space most people instinctively defended. "You're very calm," he observed. "Usually they panic by now." Maya looked at him, not aggressively, simply measuring. His right shoulder dipped slightly. Old knee injury. Dominant left hand. Heavy boots with poor traction on wet pavement. Breathing faster than he realized. None of those observations reached her face. She merely answered, "Usually isn't always." The leader folded his arms. "Do you know what I like about hospitals?" She remained silent. "Everyone inside believes they're the heroes. Doctors. Nurses. Security guards. But once they leave those doors..." He glanced around the deserted parking lot. "They're just people." His words lingered in the damp morning air. Behind Maya, the automatic hospital doors opened briefly as another employee exited carrying coffee, then disappeared toward a different parking section without noticing anything unusual. The doors closed again. Silence returned. One of the gang members reached for Maya's work bag. She shifted half a step. The movement looked almost accidental. His fingers closed on empty air. He frowned. Hold still. I'd rather not. Her voice never rose. The leader's smile disappeared for the first time. You don't seem to understand your situation. Maya studied each face carefully. Fear often narrowed people's vision, but hers widened. She noticed a small radio clipped beneath one jacket. Another man carried fresh mud on only one boot, suggesting they had recently crossed uneven ground. The SUV's engine remained running. Someone expected a quick departure. This was organized. Planned? Not random. A cold breeze swept across the parking lot, carrying the distant wail of another ambulance approaching the emergency entrance. Hospital lights reflected across Maya's tired eyes, revealing neither panic nor defiance, only patience. The leader mistook it for surrender. Wallet. Phone. Hospital ID. He extended his hand. Let's make this easy. Maya slowly removed her identification badge from her pocket. The plastic card swung gently between her fingers. Emergency department. Registered nurse. Years of service. The photograph showed the same calm eyes looking back. She handed over the wallet first. Then the phone. The men relaxed almost instantly. Their shoulders loosened. One laughed again. See? I told you she'd cooperate. The leader flipped through the wallet with visible disappointment. Not much cash. Nurses rarely become rich. Maya replied. That's unfortunate. He tossed the wallet onto the wet pavement. Maybe you'll be more useful another way. His words hung strangely. Another way. Not robbery. Confirmation settled quietly inside Maya's mind. She had suspected as much from the moment they surrounded her. Money had never been the objective. She watched as the tallest man stepped behind her while another moved toward the hospital side, cutting off any retreat. The formation tightened with practiced coordination. They were creating a controlled perimeter. Again, not ordinary criminals. The leader reached into his jacket, removed a folded photograph, and held it where she could see. Rain had blurred one corner, but the face remained clear. Maya recognized the elderly man instantly. Only hours earlier she had adjusted his oxygen mask and reassured his frightened granddaughter that he would survive until morning. Her heartbeat remained steady, though something colder settled beneath it. The leader noticed a flicker of recognition. His smile returned, wider than before. There it is, he said softly. Now we know we're talking about the right patient. Around them, dawn remained hidden beyond thick clouds while the first drops of fresh rain began striking the pavement. Maya looked once toward the emergency entrance, then back at the photograph, and finally into the leader's eyes. For the first time since the encounter began, she understood that the danger waiting in front of her was only a small part of something far worse unfolding inside the hospital, and the four men smiling around her had absolutely no idea that years before she had traded a very different uniform for a nurse's scrubs, or who had taught her that the first duty of strength was never to win a fight, but to make certain the innocent survived one. The rain gathered strength until every parked car shimmered beneath a thin sheet of water, softening the hospital lights into blurred ribbons across the asphalt. None of the four men seemed concerned. They believed isolation belonged to them. They believed the weather concealed only their intentions. Maya Bennett saw something different. Rain erased sound. It changed footing. It distorted vision. It rewarded patience over force. The leader folded the photograph and slipped it back inside his jacket with deliberate care, almost as though he were handling a valuable contract instead of an old man's image. He's in room 412, he said. You know it. You know the security schedule. You know which entrances are monitored and which ones aren't. We need 5 quiet minutes. Maya answered without hesitation. No. The word landed gently, but it carried the weight of stone. One of the younger men laughed in disbelief. She didn't even think about it. Another step closer until their shoulders nearly touched. Maybe you should. Maya looked directly into his eyes. I already did. The leader's pleasant expression faded into something colder. Listen carefully. We aren't asking you to hurt anyone. We only need access. Open one restricted door. Leave one elevator unsecured. Nobody gets injured. Maya remembered the elderly patient lying in intensive care, oxygen hissing softly beside his bed. She remembered his granddaughter refusing to sleep because she feared he would wake up alone. She remembered promising that someone would always be nearby. Promises mattered in hospitals. Sometimes they were the only medicine families could carry home. I gave my word, she said quietly. Then break it. She shook her head. Some things don't belong to me anymore once I've given them. Silence settled over the parking lot. Even the men seemed unsure how to answer someone who spoke without anger or fear. Then impatience won. The tallest attacker grabbed her wrist. It happened in less than a heartbeat. His fingers tightened around the silver bracelet. Maya did not jerk away. She simply shifted her weight. One small pivot. One controlled rotation. His balance disappeared before he understood what had happened. His own momentum carried him past her. A soft splash echoed as one knee struck the wet pavement. There was no dramatic throw. No flourish. Only precise economy of movement. The other three froze. The fallen man stared upward in confusion, more embarrassed than injured. Maya stepped back exactly one pace. Don't, she said. The warning contained neither threat nor pride. It sounded almost compassionate. The leader narrowed his eyes. Interesting. The second man rushed her with the reckless confidence of someone trying to restore the group's pride. Maya slipped sideways just enough for his shoulder to miss its target. Her open hand redirected his arm. His boots lost traction on the rain-slick pavement, and he crashed harmlessly against the side of the SUV. The impact dented the door. A curse escaped his lips. Maya still had not thrown a punch. The leader no longer smiled. Who are you? She remained silent. He circled slowly, studying her posture. No wasted movement. No raised fists. No visible panic. She stood exactly where she needed to stand, keeping every attacker within her field of vision, while leaving herself a clear path toward the emergency entrance. You're not just a nurse, he murmured. Maya answered. I am exactly a nurse. No. He shook his head. Nurses don't move like that. Some do. The rain intensified. Water streamed from the hospital roof, striking metal railings in steady rhythm. An ambulance pulled into the emergency bay 50 yards away. Paramedics hurried inside with a trauma patient, completely unaware of the confrontation unfolding beyond the concrete pillars. Life and crisis continued side by side, separated by only a few walls. The leader removed a compact radio from his pocket. Change of plan, he whispered into it. Maya caught only fragments. North entrance. Delay. 5 minutes. The words tightened something inside her chest. There were more people involved. These 4 were only the outer layer. Somewhere inside the hospital others were waiting for a signal. She could not allow this encounter to consume precious time. One of the men produced a folding knife. The blade snapped open with a sharp metallic click that disappeared beneath the rainfall. Maya's eyes rested on the weapon for only an instant. Please don't make another mistake, she said. You're giving orders now? He mocked. No. Her voice became almost sorrowful. I'm giving you a chance. He lunged. Then everything became astonishingly quiet. The narration of the world itself seemed to pause. Rain continued falling, yet it felt distant. The ambulance siren faded. Even breathing became measurable. Maya's right foot slid backward. Her shoulders relaxed instead of tensing. Time stretched into stillness. The knife descended. She moved only when movement became unavoidable. Her forearm redirected his wrist. 2 fingers pressed against a nerve near his elbow. His grip failed instantly. The knife clattered harmlessly across the pavement. Before it stopped spinning, she had already stepped away. No strike followed. No retaliation. The attacker stared at his own trembling hand in disbelief. How? He whispered. The leader's face changed completely. Recognition, long buried beneath arrogance, surfaced all at once. His eyes dropped to the scratched silver bracelet. Rain washed across the engraved geometric pattern. He stepped closer, ignoring his companions. Show me your wrist. Maya said nothing. Show me. She neither complied nor resisted. The leader leaned forward, studying the tiny insignia worked into the metal. His confidence drained with every passing second. Color left his face. Impossible, he breathed. One of the others frowned. What? The leader barely heard him. Where did you get that bracelet? Maya answered simply. It was given to me. By who? She held his gaze. Someone who believed skill without mercy becomes another form of weakness. The words struck him harder than any blow could have. His breathing quickened. Memory replaced certainty. Years earlier, before crime had become his profession, he had trained briefly under contractors who spoke in fearful respect about a mysterious instructor whose students disappeared into ordinary lives rather than battlefields. They said those few graduates carried no medals, wore no uniforms, and never revealed themselves unless innocent people stood in danger. They also said every student received the same unmarked silver bracelet before leaving, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that restraint required more discipline than violence. The leader took one involuntary step backward. No, he whispered. He isn't real. Maya's expression softened almost imperceptibly. He was. The youngest gang member looked between them in confusion. What are you talking about? The leader ignored him completely. His eyes remained fixed on the bracelet as though it belonged to a ghost. Then, almost unwillingly, he spoke a single name that made every sound in the rain seem to disappear. Ashcroft. The other three stared blankly, but Maya recognized the name instantly. It was the surname of the man who had once taught her that the greatest victory was returning home without carrying unnecessary regret. She had not heard anyone speak it aloud in nearly a decade. The leader swallowed hard, finally understanding that the quiet nurse standing before them had not been hiding extraordinary strength. She had been hiding extraordinary restraint, and in that moment every assumption they had carried into the hospital parking lot collapsed beneath the weight of a truth they had never imagined. The name lingered in the rain like the last note of a distant bell. None of the younger men understood why their leader had suddenly lost the confidence that had carried him into the hospital parking lot, but fear has a way of spreading faster than explanation. They watched his shoulders stiffen, his breathing shorten, and his eyes remained fixed on the simple silver bracelet around Maya Bennett's wrist as though it belonged to someone who should never have existed outside forgotten stories. Maya either celebrated nor threatened. She simply stood where she was, allowing silence to accomplish what violence never could. The wind carried the faint scent of wet pine from the edge of the property while another ambulance disappeared beneath the emergency entrance canopy, its flashing lights painting brief waves of red across the rain-soaked pavement. Somewhere inside the hospital, monitors continued their steady rhythm. Nurses changed medications. Physicians made impossible decisions. Families prayed beside closed doors. Life refused to pause simply because danger had arrived outside. The leader finally found his voice. They said every student vanished. Maya answered with quiet honesty. Most of us chose ordinary lives. He laughed once, but there was no humor in it. Ordinary? His eyes swept across the parking lot. You call this ordinary? She looked toward the glowing hospital windows. I spend my nights helping frightened people breathe again. I hold the hands of strangers when their families can't reach them in time. I tell children that their parents are still fighting. Compared with that, this is only a difficult morning. The words struck deeper than accusation ever could. For years the man had believed strength existed only to dominate. Standing before him was someone who had mastered it only to walk away from it. One of the younger gang members recovered enough courage to shout, "Boss, we don't have time for this. We finished the job." The leader didn't answer. Maya noticed the hesitation and understood exactly what it meant. Their plan was already unraveling. But another truth weighed more heavily on her mind. 4 men in the parking lot were never the real danger. She remembered the fragments she had overheard on the radio. North entrance. Delay. 5 minutes. Others were already moving inside the building. She reached slowly into the pocket of her scrub top. Every eye followed the motion. Instead of a weapon, she removed a small emergency pager. The screen flashed with a coded message that had arrived only moments earlier. Security alert. Restricted wing. Unauthorized access attempt. Her concern sharpened. They were already too late. The leader saw the expression change across her face. "They're inside," he whispered, realizing the same thing. Maya looked directly at him. "You still have a choice." He frowned. "Choice? Call them off." One of his companions barked a harsh laugh. "You think she's giving orders now?" Maya ignored him completely. "Every minute you wait makes what comes next harder to undo." The leader lowered his head. For the first time in many years, someone had spoken to him as though redemption remained possible instead of impossible. That simple assumption unsettled him more than any confrontation had. His radio crackled. A frantic voice burst through the speaker. "We've reached the room. The old man isn't alone." Another voice interrupted. "Hospital security is moving. We need instructions now." The leader closed his eyes. Memories he had buried beneath years of crime resurfaced without permission. Long before greed had become his profession, he had been a frightened young recruit searching for direction. He had lasted only 3 weeks under Instructor Ashcroft before quitting, convinced compassion made people weak. On the final day, the instructor had stopped him beside a training field and spoken words he had mocked for years. "Someday you will discover that every decision trains the person you become." Back then he had laughed and walked away. Standing before Maya, those words no longer sounded naive. They sounded painfully true. His thumb hovered over the transmit button. One press would continue the operation. Another would end it. Rainwater dripped from his fingertips. Around him his companions waited impatiently, unable to understand why the decision suddenly seemed impossible. Maya remained perfectly still. She offered no speeches. No threats. No promises. She simply waited, trusting that people sometimes needed silence more than persuasion. Finally the leader pressed the button. His voice emerged rough and unfamiliar. "Abort." Static answered. "Repeat?" "Abort the operation. Everyone leaves. Now." Confusion erupted over the radio. Angry protests followed. He repeated the order louder. "Leave the hospital." One by one the voices disappeared. The youngest gang member stared in disbelief. "Have you lost your mind?" "Maybe," the leader replied softly. "Or maybe I finally found it." He unclipped the radio from his belt and dropped it into a rain-filled puddle where it hissed and died. The others argued, cursed, and refused to understand, but distant police sirens had already begun weaving through the early morning traffic. Hospital security officers spilled from the emergency entrance, followed closely by local officers responding to multiple alarms triggered throughout the building. There was nowhere left to run that did not end badly. The gang members scattered in different directions, only to find officers closing every exit from the parking structure. Within minutes, handcuffs replaced confidence. Commands replaced threats. The leader never attempted to flee. He remained standing where Maya had first confronted him, his hands visible long before anyone ordered him to raise them. As officers approached, he looked at Maya one final time. "Did he teach all of you to fight like that?" Maya shook her head gently. "No." "Then what did he teach?" She glanced toward the hospital entrance where another frightened family rushed inside searching for news of someone they loved. "He taught us that protecting people is a calling. Everything else was only practice." The leader lowered his eyes. There was no answer left to give. Weeks later, the investigation uncovered the truth behind the attack. The elderly patient had once served as the financial witness against a criminal network responsible for years of extortion and violence. Though age had weakened his body, his testimony still threatened powerful people who believed fear could erase justice. Instead, a tired nurse leaving an ordinary shift had become the final barrier they never anticipated. News reports briefly celebrated the dramatic arrest, but Maya declined every interview. She returned to the emergency department the following evening, tied back her hair, adjusted her faded identification badge, and checked on patients whose names would never appear in headlines. Her coworkers never fully understood why the security staff greeted her with quiet respect after that morning. She never explained. Some stories protected others best by remaining incomplete. Months later, the elderly patient recovered enough strength to leave the hospital holding his granddaughter's hand. Before walking through the main entrance, he paused beside the nurse's station and thanked Maya with tears in his eyes. She accepted his gratitude with the same gentle smile she offered every patient, because she believed no single life deserved more compassion than another. As he disappeared into the sunlight, she unconsciously touched the scratched silver bracelet one final time. It no longer reminded her of extraordinary training or forgotten instructors. It reminded her that the hardest victories are often invisible. They are won in quiet moments when no applause follows, when restraint overcomes anger, when courage chooses protection over pride. People often imagine that heroes are recognized by the battles they fight. The truth is far quieter. Heroes are often recognized by the battles they prevent. And perhaps that is why the brightest acts of strength rarely announce themselves at all. They simply leave the world a little safer than they found it. If this story stayed with you, there are many more quiet moments of courage waiting to be discovered, and the next one may remind you that the strongest hearts are often hidden beneath the most ordinary uniforms.